Fox and Friends, to be specific, they decided to have a conversation about taxes, and it doesn't go well. I think Brian Kilmeade's brain stops working pretty quickly in the segment. What's your name? Is this Ainsley Earhart? I think it is. She also is struggling to rub together a few brain cells in order to come up with a thought. Steve Doocy somehow comes out of this looking like Albert Einstein, which is a crazy sentence to say. But here they are discussing taxes and socialism.
And when they talk about raising taxes on the wealthy people, a majority of people in this country are okay with that. So
because they're not wealthy. Most people aren't
that
wealthy.
is not true. You think the majority of the country want their taxes raised?
No. They're okay with raising taxes on
The wealthy.
the rich.
If you ask people, do you want to go to Disneyland every day? That's popular. But is it logical? Is it feasible? Is it practical? No. You can't have, but the most American people know you can't be sober and expect all these free things and have a capitalist free market society.
I just remember the poll that we cited last year about this time, and I want to say it was a Reuters poll, showed that something like 65% of Americans were okay with jacking up taxes to pay for things that they wanted. And these are politically popular.
So jacking up other people's taxes to get something you want, it's got to be very popular.
Brian, if you used to have a job pre-COVID, and now you're getting a paycheck from the government, and it's more than what you made, they like that, even though it's our money.
Right.
And if you get your college paid for, and you don't make a lot of money, they like that.
But you have to understand
it's our
something.
Money, it's very expensive.
That is called socialism.
I agree.
And that is not a successful economy. The reason why we have a free market capitalist economy. That's not what we're working towards here. Sooner or later, someone's going to have to work for a living, earn that money, and be willing to give up $7 of every $10 that they earn. And when the American people are forced to look at this holistically, that is not popular.
It's sad when you are giving more money to the government than you are putting in your bank account.
Not going to last.
Sad.
There's so much to say here. There's so much to break down. So at the end, when I think it's Ainsley says, it's not okay when you're forced to give more money to the government than you're putting in your bank account. Allow me to retort. If you're making $500 million a year, and by the way, the CEO of, I think it was Blackstone, is making $600 million. But if you're making $500 million, and you only get to take home $200 million, and the rest of that money is going to go towards healthcare and education and infrastructure and paid vacation time for people, am I going to be upset? No. In fact, I'm going to cheer that on. And if you are upset by that, you need to rethink your priorities, because the real question is, what kind of a system allows somebody to earn the equivalent of $500 million a year? At the same time, you have some people who work full-time jobs, bust their ass, and only pull in 25 or 30 grand a year. So really, I think the problem is this concept of like, did they earn that? Nobody earns $500 million a year. Nobody earns $200 billion of wealth in net worth. That's what Jeff Bezos has. Don't tell me he earned that. Don't tell me he earned it. So a lot of the problem here is this misperception, this flawed perception on what's earned and what's not earned. They live under the misimpression that we already live in a meritocracy. We don't. And so when she says, give more money to the government than you're putting in your own bank account, I honestly say, it depends. It depends how much money you make. It depends what you do. And there are plenty of instances where I think more than half of what you earn should go in the bank. It should go to people's healthcare and jobs and education and infrastructure, so on and so forth. So the real problem is the way we think about this stuff. Okay? I love when Brian Kilmeade just makes it up and says, when people are forced to look at raising taxes on the rich, it's actually not popular. You just made that up. Steve Doocy was correct. Every poll shows it's overwhelmingly popular to raise taxes on the wealthy. And Brian Kilmeade's like, I don't accept that, so when you give people the whole picture and you look at it holistically, then it's not popular. You can't just assert that. There's no evidence for that. Because it turns out people have eyes and brains, and they actually understand the phenomenal levels of wealth and income inequality that we have in this country. And they realize it's ridiculous that Jeff Bezos has a $200 billion net worth. At the same time, half of workers in this country make $30,000 a year or less. Tens of millions have no health insurance. People see this stuff, and they're not okay with it. And then Kilmeade says at one point, well, people are going to give up 7 of every $10 that they earn. No, they're not, first of all. I wish that in some instances that was the case with the wealthiest people in the country. But no, they're not. But really, he's bitching, and he's upset because in his social circle, they are in that top marginal tax bracket. You know? And when you add in state and local and federal taxes, he probably does pay about 45% of his income in taxes. But let's see what his salary is. Brian Kilmeade's salary. $4 million per year. So he might only take home $2 million per year. And he cries about that. And he bitches about that. So he thinks that's a severe injustice. Which, again, I think even the system that allows Brian Kilmeade to make $2 million a year for being a rank, disgusting propagandist, we might need to reevaluate that system. But do I like it more with him taking home 2 or 4? 2 all day. And then there's a mask off moment there. I don't know if you caught it, but you had, I think, again, Ainsley. I don't know if that's her name, and I don't know why I don't know if that's her name, because I watch Fox News enough where I should know. But she says at one point, even though it's our money, when she talks about raising taxes. So in other words, she knows the overwhelming majority of the country doesn't make nearly as much money as I make and that we make. And so when she talks about raising taxes on the wealthy, she says, even though it's our money, people want to raise taxes. So in other words, it's very selfish and specific to her and her fellow co-hosts there and the top 1%. Even though, hey, hands off our money. That's the way she views it. And again, I think that's a real mask-off moment because it's a very us versus you mentality. Like she knows, hey, I'm in the 1% and you guys are in the 99%. I'm going to rep the 1%. That's what that's an admission of. And I love the comparison from Kilmeade. Yeah, sure, people want to raise tax on the wealthy. I bet people also want to go to Disneyland every day. Well, if that's the comparison you're going to make, allow me to say, I guess in Scandinavia, they go to Disneyland every day. I guess in a lot of European nations, they go to Disneyland all day. Because they have higher taxes on the wealthy. And guess what? Those systems function a hell of a lot better than ours. So maybe going to Disneyland every day is the answer. Because if that's what raising taxes on the wealthy is, sign me up. And then he makes the comparison, oh, this is socialism. That's not a successful economy. Sooner or later, somebody's going to have to work for a living. As if in social democracies, nobody works. Of course they do. They have similar unemployment rates to ours. Many times, their unemployment rate is lower than ours. I mean, it's just every single argument he makes and belief he has on this is like a right-wing bumper sticker. You know, like there's no real thought. And there's no way, if you asked him to define socialism, there's no way he could give you an actual definition. When probably the most common one is the workers owning the means of production. You know, he doesn't think of it that way. And clearly he hasn't ever, he just has such a childish perspective in this entire conversation. And then, of course, the best part was actually the very beginning when Steve Doocy says raising taxes on the wealthy is popular. And Kilmeade, this shows you how bright he is. He says, that's not true. You think a majority of the country wants their taxes raised? That's not what he said. He said raising taxes on the wealthy is popular. I swear to God, they're having conversations with half a brain here. Kilmeade's brain really sputtered out and shit the bed there in the segment. Like, it just wasn't working. So, like I said, Steve Doocy somehow came out of that looking like a genius, and he said basically nothing. But saying nothing is a lot better than doing a rank, dumb, pure, laissez-faire capitalist propaganda. And the reality is, he doesn't even really support unfettered capitalism, because that would mean a lot of the businesses that have been rescued would fail. Because he supports all those Wall Street bailouts. He supports the elites being able to loot the treasury. So he does support welfare, but it's welfare for the rich and the corporations that Brian Kilmeade supports. So he's basically wrong about absolutely everything, and he thinks it's the biggest injustice in the world when you talk about raising taxes on the wealthy, even though the best economic period in U.S. history was when we had high marginal tax rates on the wealthy. Now, you can make a causation-correlation argument. Hey, how much is that linked? And I'll leave the interpretation up to you on that. You could view it however you want to view it. But the bottom line is, it certainly wasn't anti-growth. It certainly wasn't something that held the country back. It certainly wasn't something that led to people not working or whatever it may be. In fact, it was called the golden age of economic expansion in the U.S., and that top marginal rate was between 70% and 90%. But Brian Kilmeade doesn't like it because he's only allowed to take home $2 million instead of the $4 million that he thinks he earned.